Hello, I'm David Morris. So why did the end of the Cold War not end all wars? If we imagine the world during the Cold War as a village, we imagine one half of the village all holding guns, pointing loaded guns at the people of the other side of the village. So both sides of the village facing off all day, all night, and all it would have taken is one mistake, one tiny mistake, and we might have had World War III. That was what the Cold War was like. And then when one half collapsed, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the end of the Cold War came, there were many people, and I was there at the time, there were many of us optimistic that this could be a time that actually we could see the opportunity for international peace. Now, of course, sadly, that didn't happen. In fact, in my last year in Hungary as a young diplomat in 1992, not only in that time did we see the end of the Cold War and the rapid change in countries like Hungary, the introduction of a totally different economic system, businesses flourishing, tourists coming to visit, the place started to look completely different. But at the same time as the good news, we of course had the outbreak of war. Terrible war in Yugoslavia, as it was then called, just across the border from where I'm sitting now, and people were tearing each other apart village by village throughout the old Yugoslavia based on ethnic and national ideas that divided them. People who had lived side by side for decades during the Cold War, suddenly there was a terrible hot war. So the end of the Cold War didn't bring us peace, but it did bring a lot of optimism and a lot of work in the 1990s by people thinking about how could we do things better. I went back to Australia, I went back to my home country, to the capital city, Canberra, and I was working in the foreign ministry there. And the foreign minister of that time, Gareth Evans, a great Australian foreign minister, was working on an idea that he wanted to take to the United Nations to suggest that at that time in the 1990s, there was an opportunity for us to not just think about military power, but actually to look at investing in peace, peace building, preventative strategies, humanitarian work, to use all of the wealth of the wealthy world, all of the military industrial complex that had been built up in the United States and other places, to build that potential to keep peace and to keep peace according to global rules. Now, my boss at that time was a lawyer, so you can tell he believed in global rules, and perhaps looking back, it was all a bit idealistic and a bit optimistic, but that's only because today we're looking back and we know it didn't work. But in the 1990s, there was real optimism about a new world order. There was a real optimism that through economic interdependence, as we called it, people trading with each other, visiting each other, getting to know one another, that actually we could be like a global village. And so the villagers who had their guns pointed at each other, instead of pointing guns, we could trade with each other, we could send teachers to each other, we could learn each other's languages. And so we saw in the 90s the US and China, for example, having the best relationship they had ever had. And we saw the growth of trade, we saw the growth of investment, American investment coming into China. And so there was a real confidence that actually we could build a much more stable world, even though we still had these conflicts. Now, certainty is a very dangerous thing though, because in the 1990s, the United States, and I think the Europeans as well, started to develop a real certainty that their system was the best, that they knew best. And that seemed kind of right in the 1990s to many of us, I have to say. Many of us around the world thought, well, it looks like a particular system is dominant, a particular system is going to lead the world. But nothing in life is certain. And it wasn't long after the 1990s that two big events changed the world. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization. And of course, at the end of 2001, there were the horrific terrorist attacks on the United States, 9/11. And I'll have more to say about how those things changed the world next time.